welcome back to my channel. I just want to fill in on what's been happening lately, and also something I like to talk about, which affected me quite a lot recently. So, first of all, earlier in the week I turned 35. I had my birthday on Wednesday the 27th of July. It was a rather uneventful affair, because obviously I'm stuck at home. I just ate some cakes, some fairy cakes. My dad's got me some essential fairy cakes, some essential Waitrose fairy cakes. He went and got me some. They were rather nice iced ones, so I had 2 of those. I got loads and loads of biscuits from my dad, and my brother also went to town on me. He gave me an afternoon tea set with a sort of Waitrose teacup saucer, some Hotel Chocolat box of chocolates, and shortbread, and my dad gave me loads of boxes of biscuits as well, so I'm sorted on the biscuit front for quite a long time going forward. I got some nice cards. So yeah, nothing really happened on my birthday, but oh yeah, and I made some scones on the weekend, some really nice, it was National Trust recipe. I made some scones, some fruit scones, and I made myself an afternoon tea using my tea stands. I made some smoked salmon and dill mayonnaise sandwiches and cucumber sandwiches with Darjeeling tea. So that was quite special. So what I want to talk to you today is an incident that happened recently that I found quite, to put it mildly, quite upsetting and offensive really, and rude, and just kind of inconsiderate. So I attend some groups, some online autism groups, which I have been doing for quite some time. One of the groups I attend is a female-only group. And one of the facilitators there, a new facilitator, she hasn't been there for very long, said some things at the last group which, coming from someone who's supposed to understand autism, came across as rather ignorant and ill-conceived, to put it mildly. So basically, she was doing a presentation on adulting and how autistic people really often struggle with adulting, like daily tasks and things like that, like filling out forms, that sort of thing. So I said, one of my really big issues is that I find it really, really difficult to fill out forms, to the point of finding it. Sorry, she's got flies on my sock. To the point of, so I find it really, really difficult to fill out forms, to the point of even finding it very difficult to sign a form, just to put my signature on a form, can be very, very overwhelming for me. And it kind of, I hate this about myself. I wish I could just fill out the form just like any ordinary person, but I really, really struggle, to fill out forms. It's a massive effort for me. The organisation involved, just everything, even the simplest thing of just signing a form, takes so much effort. So I said this, and I said, I'm sure most typical people, for them it's not an issue. That's not to say there aren't some typical people out there who might struggle for other reasons, but most typical people clearly don't have that degree of problem filling out forms, right? Now this is what she said, which was kind of ill-conceived and inconsiderate and felt rather ableist. She said, we mustn't I can't remember exactly how she put it, but it's on the lines of, we mustn't generalise, she said, we mustn't generalise, just as we don't generalise about neurodiverse people, we mustn't generalise about neurotypical people, she said, because there are some neurotypical people out there who will also find it difficult to fill out forms and things like that. And I said, no, I said, you're wrong. I said, actually, this is to do with my autism. I said, most typical people clearly don't have the degree of disability I have filling out forms. I said, I don't think I really expressed myself very clearly because I was feeling quite angry, because what she said was extremely ableist. And first of all, I'd never even said that all neurotypical people find it easy to fill out forms. I said most typical people don't have the problems I have. Most. I didn't say all, because obviously there are going to be some non-autistic people, like neurotypicals, or actually I should say, well, neurotypicals are like obviously people with ADHD and other conditions might have that problem as well. So, I mean non-autistics essentially. People who don't have neurological conditions. Obviously most of them are going to find that for part of adulting not too difficult. Yeah, okay, but some of them might find it a little bit hard, but not to the point of actually not being able to do it for days, and consequently getting into all sorts of trouble because people get annoyed and stuff and don't understand why it's so hard just to sign a form. I don't think most, because obviously, I'm not saying all, but I don't think most typical people experience that. And even if there are some who do experience that, it's irrelevant to my autism, because I'm talking about a problem I have that's directly impacted by my neurology, by my autism. So saying, oh yeah, some neurotypicals are going to struggle too, is completely irrelevant to my problem, and really, really ableist. It would be like saying to someone with cerebral palsy, oh, we mustn't generalise about people who don't have cerebral palsy. Some people who don't have cerebral palsy might sometimes have achy joints and might find it a little bit difficult to walk upstairs sometimes. How offensive would that be? And yet, that's what she was saying about my autism, essentially. She was basically trivialising it in that sentence. So, of course, I started to feel quite angry, because I just felt misunderstood, and it was completely irrelevant and beside the point. Where I simply said, most typical people. She could have just simply, if she was basically being caring and understanding, she would have just simply empathised with that predicament, kind of said, yeah, that's clear, that's an autism struggle sort of thing or something, and just left it at that. She was just so rude, and so that was the first thing that made me kind of angry, and I was feeling quite heated, because I was thinking, what's this got to do with my autism? I don't give a get like other people who aren't non-autistic. It's completely irrelevant. I've got a diagnosis for a reason. Autism's a disability. I don't care if Joe Bloggs down the road sometimes finds it a bit difficult to fill out a form. He's not autistic, and he clearly doesn't have the same extent of disability as what I have, because otherwise he'd be diagnosed with something. It's completely irrelevant. So really trivialising. So that's the first thing. The second issue, which resulted in me quitting and leaving a group because it was just so rude and offensive, basically, and was real like gaslighting, was okay. So basically, I mentioned an article I'd recently been reading in Spectrum magazine. I've talked about this on this video on this channel before, but it's an article in Spectrum magazine, which is an online newsletter which covers autism research, and they've done some more research into the overlap between anxiety and autism. I talked about this in another video some time back about research which has shown changes in autistic people who have anxiety, changes in their amygdala, relative to autistic people who don't have anxiety, and also a control group of people with anxiety but who aren't autistic, who have different neurological signature. And there's been research to suggest that there could be a very autism-specific form of anxiety which has a unique signature in the brain, and which could suggest a particular subtype of autism, driven by very high levels of anxiety specifically around routines and interests and the need for control, and how this anxiety, that because this anxiety is such an extreme issue for some people with autism, they're proposing there could be a very particular subtype of autism, which obviously still needs to be investigated, and obviously it's early days. I have done a bit more research, and I read a new article recently in Spectrum magazine, which I can't quite recall what it said though, but yeah, they have done some more research into it, and there is this ongoing kind of investigation as to whether or not there could be a very specific form of autism which involves high levels of anxiety, specifically around routines and interests. And I could relate to this. When I read that article, I was like, wow, they're basically describing me, because a large part of my disability is caused by this very extreme, heightened level of need for control around my routines and interests, and obviously subsequent anxiety, because unfortunately the world doesn't conform to my need for control. So yeah, it's basically describing me. So I was like thinking, wow, if there is such a subtype, then clearly I fall into that one. And I look forward to hearing more about this. So I mentioned that at the group, just saying how validating it was reading this article, that I could really relate to it and everything. And this is what she said, which was really irrelevant and beside the point. Basically, she completely dismissed what I was saying. She said, oh, well, it hasn't been confirmed yet. Yeah, and I never said it had been confirmed. That's kind of beside the point. And she said, and anxiety is mental health and it's separate to autism. And it's not part of the diagnostic criteria. I never said it was part of the diagnostic criteria. So that was basically putting words into my mouth I never said, which is really infuriating when people do that. Of course, anxiety isn't part of the diagnostic criteria of autism. Autism is diagnosed based on a triad of impairments, so social communication, social imagination, and repetitive ritualised behaviours, routines, activities. That's how autism is and sensory issues. That's how autism is diagnosed. Anxiety isn't part of the core criteria, and I never said it was, because obviously they need to be quite strict in how they diagnose autism to distinguish it from other conditions. And there needs to be something core, which is autism, which isn't shared by other conditions. But that doesn't mean that anxiety isn't biologically a big part of autism for some people, and indeed connected to that core neurology for some people. And that's what this research is trying to show, that actually anxiety could be a big part of autism for some people. Maybe they need to have a subgroup in the DSM which actually highlights anxiety as part of autism for some group of people. So they might even include anxiety as part of the criteria alongside those other issues for a subgroup of autism maybe in the future, because for some autistics, anxiety might actually be a big driver of their neurology, and that made a lot of sense to me. I wasn't saying that it had been proved, which is completely irrelevant, and I never said that anxiety was part of the diagnostic criteria. So she put words into my mouth, she completely dissed what I was saying, she made me feel like really bad for saying it, like basically. And then, she was basically she was like saying, well, no, anxiety's not part of autism, it's a completely separate thing, it's not part of the criteria, I never said it was part of the criteria. Completely invalidated what I was saying, whereas if she was being sympathetic and understanding, she would have said something like, oh, I could see why that article was really interesting for you and really help you, and it'll be really interesting to find out where this research leads, and maybe there is such a subgroup or something like that, and we'll wait and find out. So that would have been a nice thing to say. But no, she basically completely dissed what I was saying. So then I got on the defensive, and I went, oh, you're wrong, I said, you're wrong. I said, for me, because I was getting quite heated at this point, I said, for me, anxiety is a really big part of my autism. It's not separate, it's a really big part of my autism. I said, you're wrong. And at that point I just left the group, because I was going to use the F word at that point if I stayed, which probably was not a good idea. But I mean, seriously, I told her she was wrong, and then I left, because if I stayed, it wouldn't be good. But like I said, it was just so invalidating. So two things happened that were invalidating. She trivialised my issues filling out forms by saying neurotypicals have that some neurotypicals have a similar problem, when actually no, they don't, not to the extent I have. Because if they did have the extent of problem as what I've had, they'd be diagnosed with something, if not autism, an ADHD or a mental health problem, so clearly that's not the case. And So that was like really ableist. And then she basically, I was getting excited about this article I read because it was really validating, and then she basically completely dissed it and basically was trying to tell me that it hadn't been peer reviewed yet and blah 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 blah, which is completely irrelevant and beside the point, because it doesn't matter as far as I'm concerned. I read something that really validated my experience and made me feel good because it really like ticked a lot of boxes for me, and that was just really ableist as well and really like disregarding of my personal experience, and just really, really rude. Because she's not in my brain, you know. It's just so belittling. So, anyway, so I quit, and I don't know if I'm going back to that group. I attend another group, which is really good. It's a self-advocacy group, and we've got a really lovely facilitator who I get on with really well there, and he's always really understanding and really nice. And possibly because he's disabled as well, although he's physically disabled, he's not autistic, but he might understand it because of that, you know, because he's disabled, he might kind of get it more, but he's really nice and I get on with him. And yeah, but this other group I'm just kind of having issues with, and by the way, it's not just me who's been having issues with it. Quite a few people have been finding that group really belittling and ableist as well, and lots of for the things some of the facilitators say. Surprisingly, this person should know better because they do have autistic kids, but I do find that, and that's the reason why I get into autism, just because they have autistic kids, by the way. I do find that, and I've experienced this before, and by no means am I generalising, because obviously I haven't met all parents of autistic kids, but I have unfortunately had a number of experiences with parents, mothers of autistic kids, who have been quite patronising and also and very much into neurodiversity stuff, and they do not, and because they're so ideologically driven, they seem to find it really hard to understand why autism might be a disorder or a disability for some people, because they don't see it that way. And also a number of them are really trivialising, like that one at that CAS charity, which where I got some counselling from, which was absolutely awful, who basically said, oh, we're all on the spectrum, not nonsense. And she was a parent of an autistic kid. And I was like thinking, seriously, you need to go back to school. It's like, just because you have a kid with autism doesn't make you an expert. Clearly you're not an expert, or you wouldn't say such crap like that. Obviously I didn't tell her I had her, but you know. But yeah. So I'm kind of a bit wary now, because of those bad experiences. I'm a little bit wary now of parents of autistic kids supporting me, because in my experience, they haven't been good. But it's not to say, obviously, I want parents of autistic kids out there who aren't understanding, and I know a number of them on Twitter who are very understanding. So obviously, you know, I can't generalise, but the ones on Twitter who are understanding tend to be the parents of kids who are more disabled and also are anti-NDM, the neurodiversity movement. It seems to be the neurodiversity hardcore ones who are most offensive in my experience. Unfortunately, I've had bad experiences. But yeah, it was not good. Not good at all. In good news, by the way, do let me know your thoughts on this. I'll be interested to know. In very good news, though, some good news to end this video. The GP has agreed that I can have both the flu jab and the COVID jab in autumn because of my very severe germ phobia and vulnerabilities around getting sick, in terms of like the fact I can't cope with illness and panic attacks and all those things, and I won't be able to cope getting ill. So, yeah.